What would you say was the best movie concept Pixar have ever come up with? Because let's be honest, they've had a few good ones. Toy Story, Monsters Inc., the house-lifting antics of Up. But by far the best idea they've had, for my mind, was 2015's brain-delving journey Inside Out. And it's no surprise to me that it makes Pixar's top 5 biggest grossing movies list, coming in at number 5. That first movie told a mostly complete story and told it well, so a few were surprised in late 2022 when Pixar announced a sequel. Where do you go with the story? How do you excite the audience again? I'm pleased to say that, while Inside Out 2 treads fairly familiar ground, it executes its tale so well that, in the end, it doesn't really matter. This is a brilliant example of how to tell a story on the big screen, and if you stick around, I'll tell you why. So, Inside Out 2 continues the story of Riley, our main character from the first film, and of the personified emotions in her mind. Riley's 13 now and about to go to high school, but just before she starts, she and her friends Bree and Grace are invited to an ice hockey training weekend where Riley intends to secure a place on her new school's team. Unfortunately, puberty hits just as she sets off, and Riley falls suddenly into the grip of the same social worries and anxieties we all felt at that age. Can she successfully navigate this new emotional world without losing her old friends? Or will the new personified emotions of anxiety, envy, embarrassment and ennui trip her up? I mentioned at the start of this video that the first Inside Out film was a fantastic concept and nothing has changed here. Inside Out 2 is a constantly inventive film, tossing ideas casually at the viewer that other animated movies would kill for. The basic premise, the bringing to life of abstract feelings and concepts such as joy, sadness, sense of self, sarcasm, works so well and is both thought-provoking, funny and entertaining. The characters are likeable again. The hard work was done with Riley in the first one when we all watched her go through so much as she dealt with her parents' upcoming house move. We come into the film already rooting for her. But the same goes for her emotions, who are well characterised throughout. Joy is relentless in her positivity again, never giving in, and anger is just as funny as before whenever he blows up. Of the new ones, Anxiety, voiced by Stranger Things' Maya Hawke, gets most of the screen time, taking an almost antagonistic role in the story. But the others, Envy, Embarrassment and Ennui, each have their part to play, even if at times you do wonder whether they were used enough to justify their presence. Speaking of the story, the one here in Inside Out 2 has that usual Pixar polish, care and attention. It's so well structured and paced, developing Riley's problem in a believable and relatable way. I'm pretty confident, having checked out the age range of the viewers of the Movie Maverick channel, that most watching this video have already gone through their teenage years, and will probably remember how difficult it all was. The feelings of embarrassment, shame, the desire to impress others, not be left behind. Inside Out 2 uses its simple hockey camp premise to bring all of this to life, and to be honest, it doesn't put many feet wrong. In fact, it often zigs when you expect it to zag, keeping things fresh right up until the end, even if the overall direction of the plot is obvious as soon as it's introduced. If the story zigs instead of zagging sometimes, you can't really say the same about Inside Out 2's animation style, which is pretty much identical to the first, apart from a couple of cool little instances where it mixes older 2D animation with the 3D. It's also reminiscent of Pixar's overall animation style across their films, which has become a bit homogenised over the last few years. Whether you like that is a personal preference, I guess. Still, it's bright, colourful, energetic and keeps things interesting visually when the story slows. One thing I sometimes find a little weak in animated films, including Pixar's, is the voice acting. There's been a trend over the last 20 years or so to use well-known A-list actors for voiceovers rather than actors working in the medium. And while that can go well with performers whose voices are big enough and expressive enough to carry a film, read Tom Hanks, Mike Myers and let's say John Goodman, there are plenty of instances where the actors don't have the necessary oomph, the necessary expression. In Inside Out 2, I think everyone does a decent job for the most part, even if Bill Hader, a fantastic A-lister who voiced Fear in the first film, didn't reprise his role over a pay dispute. Lastly, we come to the music. I think the twinkling piano theme of the first Inside Out movie is probably the nicest piece of music in any Pixar film. Michael Giacchino is responsible for that as far as I can tell, a man who also worked on The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Up and more, all great scores, especially that Up one. Animated films are elevated by a memorable score, and as soon as familiar themes kicked in Inside Out 2, it was hard not to feel a swell of emotion. So where does that leave us? Well, there isn't really much wrong with Inside Out 2. I said at the start of this video that there were a few people surprised when Pixar announced a sequel back in 2022, and I think you could still make an argument for that now. This latest movie says something about the difficulties of growing up. It has a strong message of acceptance of one's foibles, faults and strengths, but it doesn't really say anything you haven't heard before. But to be honest, that doesn't really matter because this movie is so skillfully put together, there's so much assurance in its construction, its story, animation and pacing that you'll love it anyway, and it will move you all the same. This is what Pixar have been doing pretty consistently for 30ish years now, and to be honest, we're lucky to have them. Don't race out to the cinema if money's tight, but definitely make the time to see Inside Out 2 at some point. Anyway, nothing more to say, this is Movie Mavericks signing out.